She sat under a palm tree in the hill country between Ramah and Bethel. Grown men stood in a line, waiting for her to tell them who was right. 900 iron chariots held the valley roads that year. The highways were empty. The villages had gone quiet, and Israel had lived under that for 20 years. And every morning, she took her seat under that tree and held court anyway. Nobody in the book of Judges has a resume like hers, and most people cannot name her. Come sit close. Tonight, I want to put a question on the table and then take my time answering it. Because the fast answer is wrong, and the slow answer is better. Who is the most powerful woman in your Bible? Now, most people go one of two directions with that, and I understand both. Some of you went straight to the queen, who came up out of the south with a caravan of camels loaded with gold and spices, who walked into the richest court on earth and sat down across from Solomon to test him with hard questions. A head of state, nobody's wife in that story, nobody's daughter, a sovereign traveling on her own name. Others went to the girl in the Persian palace, Esther, an orphan who ended up queen of an empire that ran from India to Ethiopia, who walked into a throne room uninvited, knowing it could cost her life, and saved a whole people by doing it. Both good answers. I am not going to knock either one. But there is a third woman, and she does not get named in this conversation nearly enough. And when you actually lay out what the text says about her, it is not close. She had no palace, no caravan, no crown that I can find anywhere in the record. What she had was a tree, a country under military occupation, and 4 job titles in a single verse. And I will tell you up front why I think she gets left off the list. It is not that people dislike her. It is that she does not look like power. There is no gold in her story, no throne room, no dramatic entrance. She is just sitting down. When you picture a powerful woman, you picture a rival. The caravan coming over the hill, the queen walking into the court. Deborah never arrives anywhere. Everybody comes to her. I am going to walk you through all 3 of them tonight. And I am going to tell you which one I would put first, and exactly why. And you are free to disagree with me when I am done. Let me tell it the way it happened. To understand what she was holding up, you have to understand what had fallen on that country. So let me set the ground first. Judges chapter 4 verse 1. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, when Ehud was dead. Verse 2. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera, which dwelt in Harosheth of the Gentiles. Now, if you did not grow up in this book, let me tell you plainly how Judges works, because the whole thing runs on one wheel that turns over and over. There is no king in Israel yet. No capital, no standing army, no central government at all. 12 tribes spread across the hill country, loosely tied together, each one mostly minding its own business. And the pattern goes like this. The people drift. A foreign power moves in and takes the country. The people suffer under it long enough to cry out. God raises up a deliverer, called a judge. The land gets peace for a generation. And then the whole thing starts over. That is the wheel. Chapter 4 is one turn of it, and this turn is the worst one yet. Jabin reigns in Hazor, up north. Hazor was a real city, and a big one, the largest fortified site in that whole region. The kind of place that could put an army in the field and keep it there. And his general is a man named Sisera, based at Harosheth, out where the plain opens up. Remember that name. Sisera is the one who matters in this story, not the king. The king sits in Hazor. Sisera is the one on the ground with the equipment. And verse 3 tells you what the equipment was. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. 900 chariots of iron. Let me make that mean something to you, because a number on a page does not land the way it should. Israel at this point is a people of hill farmers and shepherds. Bronze tools, mostly. A man goes to war with what he has in the shed. A spear if he is doing well, a farm implement if he is not. Chapter 5, verse 8 says it outright. Was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? 40,000 men, and the poet cannot find a proper weapon among them. Now put an iron chariot in front of that. A chariot is a platform with 2 horses in front of it and armed men riding on it, and it moves at a speed nothing on foot can answer. On flat ground, it is not a fight. It is a harvest. The men in the chariot are up high, moving fast, and the men on the ground are in the open with sticks. 900 of them, on the plain, controlling every road that mattered. And 20 years, the verse says. He mightily oppressed them 20 years. Now I want to be careful about one thing, because iron gets talked about loosely. The chariots being iron does not mean somebody cast a wagon out of solid metal. It means the working parts, the rims, the fittings, the armor on the front, the weapons of the men riding it, were iron rather than bronze, and iron holds an edge that bronze will not. That is the whole story of that era in one sentence. Whoever had the iron set the terms for everybody who did not. So this is not a story about a big army against a small army. It is a story about a people who had been locked out of the technology, and a general who knew exactly what that was worth, and used it for 2 decades. Now, chapter 4 gives you the facts. If you want to know what it felt like, you have to go to chapter 5, because chapter 5 is the song, and the song remembers things the report leaves out. Judges 5, verse 6. In the days of Shamgar the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied, and the travelers walked through byways. Read that twice. The highways were unoccupied. Nobody used the roads, not because there was a law against it, because you did not survive it. The main routes were where the chariots ran, so ordinary people stopped using them. If you had to get from your village to the next one, you went the long way, over the hills, through the back trails, on foot, hoping. That is what occupation looks like from the ground. Not soldiers kicking indoors every night. Just a slow narrowing of where a person can go. Verse 7. The inhabitants of the villages ceased. They ceased in Israel. The villages ceased. The small unwalled settlements, the places with no gate and no wall where farming families lived, those emptied out. People pulled back into whatever fortified places they could find, or they went up into the hills, or they just stopped being a village and scattered. And there is one more line in that song, I do not want to lose. Verse 8 asks whether a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. 40,000 men, and the poet is telling you she could not find a proper weapon in the whole count. So picture the situation in full. No usable roads, no open villages, no weapons worth the name. 900 iron chariots working the plain, and a general at Harosheth who has had 20 years to get comfortable. That is not a nation waiting for a fight. That is a nation that has already lost one and is living in the aftermath. Now do the arithmetic on 20 years of that. 20 years is the part I want to slow down on, because I do not think we hear it right. A man born the year Sisera took the roads is a grown man of 20 when this chapter opens. He has never in his life walked a main road. He has never seen a full market. He would not know what a country at peace even looks like, because nobody has been able to show him one. I understand that better now than I did at 40, My grandmother was born in 1901 in that part of Georgia, and there were roads and rooms and counters that was simply not for her. And by the time I came along, she did not talk about them as an outrage. She talked about them the way you talk about weather. That is what 20 years does. It stops being an injustice you are angry about and becomes the shape of the world. That is the country. Now let me show you the one person in it who was still acting like the shape of the world was temporary. Because here is what verse 3 says. The people finally did. They cried unto the Lord. 20 years in. Not year 1. Not year 5. 20. I do not say that to shame anybody. I say it because it is honest, and because that book is honest about it. People do not cry out at the beginning. At the beginning, you cope. You adjust. You find the byway, and you take the byway, and you tell yourself, it is not that bad. It takes a very long time before a person is willing to say out loud that they cannot carry this anymore. And when they finally did, the answer was already sitting under a tree in the hill country, doing her job. Judges chapter 4, verse 4. And I want you to hear this one slowly, because everything in it is doing work. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time. Count what is in that sentence. Her name, Deborah, which means bee, and I will let you decide whether the storyteller was having a little fun there. Her office, a prophetess, which means she is one of the people God speaks through, and in that period there were not many. Her household, the wife of Lapidoth, which is the one detail the text gives and then never mentions again. Lapidoth does not appear anywhere else in Scripture, does not speak, does not act. And then the function. She judged Israel at that time. 4 things in one verse. And here is what I want you to notice about how the writer handles it. He does not explain it. There is no verse saying, now this was unusual. There is no clause defending the arrangement, or telling you how it came about, or apologizing for it to anybody. The text reports that a woman was the prophet and the judge of Israel with exactly the same flat tone it uses to tell you Sisera had chariots. It is a fact about the situation. Next verse. I have read a lot of commentary over the years that spends a great deal of energy on that verse. The verse itself spends none. And I want to sit on the Lapidoth detail for a second, because it is strange in a way people skip. In that book, when a woman appears, she is almost always positioned by a man. Somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother. And that man usually does something in the story. Here you get the name, and then nothing. Lapidoth never speaks. He never appears at Tabor. He is not in the song. Whoever he was, the account is not interested in him, and it does not use him to explain her. Some readers have wondered whether the phrase is even a husband's name at all. The word carries a sense of torches or flames, and a few have read it as a description rather than a man. I am not going to hang anything on that. I mention it only so you know the verse is stranger in the Hebrew than it looks in the English, and that careful people have gone back and forth on it for a long time. What I do notice is this. The one relationship the text names, it names and drops. Every other line about her is about what she does. Now, here is the other office in that verse, and it is the one that gets skipped in a hurry. Prophetess. In the whole book of Judges, that word appears exactly once, and it is attached to her. Go looking for another one. Gideon does not have it. Samson does not have it. Jephthah does not have it. God sends an angel to Gideon. God sends a nameless prophet in chapter 6 who delivers one speech and disappears, but a standing prophetic voice, a person the nation could go to and expect to hear from God through. In that entire dark stretch of history, the text gives that title to one person. Verse 5. And she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim. and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. The palm tree of Deborah. The tree is named after her. Whoever wrote this down is writing at a time when that tree, or the memory of that tree, still carried her name. The way a road in your town carries the name of somebody long gone, and everybody still uses it without thinking about who they were. And look at the geography. Between Ramah and Bethel, in the hill country of Ephraim. That is the middle of the country, up in the highlands, which is exactly where chariots cannot go. She set up in the one kind of terrain the occupation could not reach. That is not an accident. That is a person who knew the map. And read the last clause of verse 5 again. The children of Israel came up to her for judgment. They came up to her. She did not ride a circuit. She did not go from town to town holding hearings. People walked, from wherever they were, through the byways, past whatever the chariots had left of the roads, up into the hill country, to stand under a tree and wait their turn. Think about what has to be true for that to happen. A whole country under occupation, with no central authority, no court system, no police, no king. And when two men have a dispute, they cannot settle. They walk into the hills to a woman under a palm tree, and they abide by what she says. Nobody appointed her to that. There was no office to appoint her to. The nation simply decided, over years, that her word was the word. That is the kind of authority you cannot hand somebody and cannot take away from them. A crown can be taken. An appointment can be revoked. But when a whole country has quietly agreed that a particular person tells the truth and does not take sides, there is no mechanism anywhere for undoing that. It was built one ruling at a time, over years, by a woman who kept getting it right. And think about the walk those people made. Byways, remember. The main roads were not usable. So a man with a grievance about a boundary, or a debt, or an animal is going up, through the hills on foot, days maybe, to get an answer he is going to have to live by. You do not make that trip for somebody you half trust. You make it because there is nowhere else in the country where you will get a straight answer. Now let me tell you what a judge actually was, because the English word points you the wrong direction. We hear judge, and we picture a courtroom and a gavel and a person who settles legal disputes. That was part of it. Verse 5 says exactly that. People came to her for judgment. But in the book of Judges, the office is bigger than that. A judge is the closest thing that period has to a national leader. They settle disputes, yes. They also raise armies, plan campaigns, and lead the country through war. So when the text says she judged Israel, it is not describing a magistrate. It is describing the person in charge. And here is the comparison that settles it for me. Go through the rest of that book and look at the other judges. Gideon, a deliverer. God calls him for one campaign against Midian, and he executes it. Samson, a deliverer, and barely that. He never leads anybody. He is a one-man wrecking crew with a personal grudge. Jephthah, a military commander the elders hire because they are desperate, and he negotiates his terms first. Ehud, an assassin with a plan. Every one of those men rises for a crisis and is defined by it. Deborah is already sitting when the crisis chapter opens. Verse 5 has her holding court, before verse 6 has her summoning a general. The judging came first, and the war came into a country that was already coming to her for rulings. And she is the only one in the book who holds all three at once. The prophetic office, God speaks through her. The judicial office, the nation brings her its disputes. And in the next few verses, military command, she is going to tell a general where to put 10,000 men and when to move them. Here is where I land, and you can weigh it for yourself. Samuel later holds prophet and judge together, and that is why Samuel is such a big figure. Deborah is doing it first, in a worse century, in an occupied country, with no temple and no institution behind her. just a tree, and a line of people who trusted her. Verse 6. And she sent and called Barak the son of Abinoam out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun. Start with the first 3 words. And she sent. She summons him. He is in Kadesh, up in Naphtali territory, which is a long way north of that palm tree. A serious journey, days on foot through occupied country. And a runner arrives at his door and says, She wants you, and he comes. That right there tells you more about her standing than any title does. A fighting man from a northern tribe drops what he is doing and travels the length of the country because a woman in Ephraim sent for him. Nobody records him asking why, or asking who she thinks she is, or sending word back that he is busy. He comes. Now look at how she frames the message. Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded? She puts it as a question, and it is a particular kind of question. It is the kind a person asks when they are reminding you of something rather than informing you of it. Has he not already told you? She is not delivering brand new information to a man who has never heard from God. She is putting a thing in front of him that he has, at some level, already been avoiding. And then look at the content of the orders, because this is the part that decides my whole argument tonight. Go and draw toward Mount Tabor. Take 10,000 men. Take them from Naphtali and Zebulun. That is a location, a troop count, and a levy from 2 named tribes. Slow down. This part matters. That is not spiritual encouragement. That is not go and be strong, and the Lord be with you. That is an operational order. Where to muster, how many, and out of which tribes. She has picked the mountain, she has set the number, and she has named the manpower pool. Verse 7 finishes it. And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. So she has also picked the enemy's ground, the river Kishon. She is telling him where Sisera is going to end up before Sisera has any idea he is going anywhere. That is a battle plan, delivered by the prophet to the general, in her own words. And notice which 2 tribes she calls up. Naphtali and Zebulun. Those are northern tribes, the ones sitting closest to Hazor and Harosheth, the ones who have been living under the worst of it for 20 years. She does not levy the comfortable tribes down south who have been less affected. She calls the ones with the most to lose and the most reason to come. That is not a spiritual insight. That is somebody who knows her country. She knows which men will actually show up when the runner arrives, and she knows why. And notice what she does not do. She does not offer to lead the men herself. She has the standing to. The nation already brings her its disputes, and this is a national crisis. But the levy goes to Barak, a fighting man from the north, because 10,000 northern farmers will follow a northern fighting man into a valley in a way they might not follow anybody else. I sit with that. It would have been easy for her to keep the whole thing in her own hands. She hands the command away and keeps the direction. Verse 8. And Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. That is the general's answer to an order from God, relayed by the prophet of Israel. If you come, I go. If you do not come, I do not. Now I have heard that verse preached hard against Barak more times than I can count. And I want to be fairer to him than that, because I do not think the text is as harsh as the preaching. Read what he is actually saying. He is not refusing the mission. He is not questioning whether the word is real. He is saying he will not go into that valley without the person through whom God is speaking standing there beside him. Given what he is being asked to do, Take farm boys with no shields down toward chariot country. That is not an unreasonable thing to want. But here is what it reveals, and this is the part that matters for tonight's question. Barak located the authority in her, not in the message, in her. He needed her physically present, because in his mind, the presence of God in this campaign and the presence of that woman were the same thing. A general does not say that about a messenger. He says it about a commander. And there is a witness to that, reading 1,000 years later. Hebrews chapter 11, the great roll call of faith, verse 32. The writer is running out of room and starts listing names, and Barak is in that list. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel. He made the roll. Deborah is not named in that verse. I noticed that, and I am not going to pretend it does not sit oddly with everything I have just told you. But I would put it this way, and you can weigh it. That list is a list of men who did something through faith, and the writer was working fast at the end of a long chapter. Judges 4 and 5 are the record, and the record puts her name first 5 times running. I would rather trust the 2 chapters that tell the story than one hurried list. Verse 9. And she said, I will surely go with thee. Notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor, for the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Look at what she does with his condition. She does not scold him. She does not argue. She says, I will surely go. And then she tells him the price of it, straight out, before a single man has been mustered. The journey shall not be for thine honor. She names the outcome in advance. The victory is coming, and the credit is not going to land where a general would want it to land. And she tells him that to his face, and then she gets up and goes with him anyway. Here is my read of that verse, and I have turned it over a long time. Most tellings treat it as a punishment. You hesitated, so you lose the glory. I do not hear a punishment in it. I hear a woman telling a man the truth about what is coming, and then walking beside him into it regardless. I was hard on Barak for years. Somewhere in my 50s, I got less hard on him. I have been the man in that verse. I have stood in a doorway and said, I will do it if you come with me. And the person who came with me knew exactly what it cost me to ask. My grandmother used to say, the bravest thing in that chapter is not the battle. It is a man admitting out loud what he needs. She said that with a fan going on a hot night, and I did not understand it until I was old. Before we go down to the water, if you have sat with me this far, subscribe. I tell these one at a time, and I would like you here for the next one. And put one word in the comments. Deborah. Just the name, so I know who came up the hill tonight. Then tell me which telling you want next. If somebody came to mind while I was reading verse 8, somebody who has been holding a thing up alone and would not admit they need company, send this to them. One person is plenty. Now, Mount Tabor, verse 10. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went up with him. 10,000 men at his feet. That is an old expression meaning on foot, infantry, no horses, no wheels. 10,000 men walking. And the last clause of that verse keeps doing what the whole chapter keeps doing. And Deborah went up with him. She is in the column. Now, let me put the map in your head, because this battle is won by geography before a weapon comes out. Mount Tabor sits at the northeast corner of the Great Plain, the Valley of Jezreel, the flattest, most open farmland in that whole country. Tabor itself is a rounded hill that comes up out of the plain suddenly, steep on all sides. From the top you can see the whole valley laid out under you. Below is chariot country, the best chariot country in the region. That plain is where armies with wheels went to win. On top of Tabor, wheels are useless, a chariot cannot climb it. So 10,000 men with no shields go up and sit on the one piece of high ground, in the middle of the enemy's best terrain, in plain view, where Sisera cannot possibly miss them. Verse 12. And they showed Sisera that Barak the son of Abinoam was gone up to Mount Tabor. Of course they did. That was the point. Verse 13. And Sisera gathered together all his chariots, even 900 chariots of iron, and all the people that were with him, from Harosheth of the Gentiles unto the river of Kishon. All 900. Every chariot he had brought out at once down to the river Kishon. Read that against what she told Barak back in verse 7. I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera with his chariots and his multitude. She named that river before any of this happened. And now the most feared army in the region has parked itself exactly where she said it would be, because it saw an opportunity it could not resist. Sisera is not being stupid here. Understand that. From where he sits, this is the best day of his career. The rebels have come down out of the hills and put themselves in the open. All he has to do is wait for them to descend into the valley, and then he runs them down. He is right about everything, except the ground under his wheels. And I want you to feel the waiting, because the text moves fast, and the men on that hill did not. 10,000 farmers are sitting on a hilltop, watching an army assemble below them. It takes time to bring 900 chariots out of Harosheth. Hours, maybe most of a day. So they sat up there and watched the dust come, and watched the line get longer, and watched the thing they had been afraid of for 20 years arrange itself in the open, where they could count it. Nobody on that hill had a shield. Remember chapter 5, verse 8. 40,000 in Israel, and not a shield or a spear among them worth naming. Some of those men had never seen a chariot up close. Some of them had seen exactly one, once, and had run. Now there were 900 of them in a row across the valley floor, and every man on Tabor could see all of them at the same time. That is the situation when Deborah opens her mouth in verse 14. Verse 14. And Deborah said unto Barak, Up, for this is the day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. She gives the order to move, not the general. Her, standing on that hilltop looking down at 900 chariots spread across the valley floor, the word that starts the battle comes out of her mouth. Up. This is the day. I want you to hold that picture, because it is the whole argument of tonight in one frame. 10,000 men on a hillside. A general beside her. And the person who says go is the woman, and the timing is hers too. This is the day. Not tomorrow. Not when the odds look better. Now. Somebody on that hill knew something about that valley that Sisera did not, and it was not Barak. So they go down. 10,000 men running downhill into the teeth of the only weapon system that mattered in that century. Understand what that order asked of them. Every instinct those men had said, stay on the hill. On the hill, the chariots cannot reach you. The second your foot touches the valley floor, you are in the open, on flat ground, against 900 vehicles that can run a man down at will. There is not a soul in that column who did not know it. They went anyway. Verse 14 says, 10,000 men after him, and not one line in either chapter records anybody arguing about it. That is what 20 years of somebody being right buys you. When she said, this is the day, 10,000 men who had every reason to stay put, picked up whatever they had, and ran down that slope. Chapter 4 tells you the result in one flat verse. Verse 15, the Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his host with the edge of the sword before Barak. If that was all we had, we would never know how. But we have chapter 5, and the song tells you. Judges 5, verse 20. They fought from heaven, The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Verse 21. The river of Kishon swept them away, that ancient river, the river Kishon. The Kishon. That river runs through the middle of that plain, and most of the year it is barely a river at all. A shallow thing you could step over in the dry season. But that ground is a floodplain, and when the rain comes hard in those hills, the Kishon comes up fast, and the whole valley floor turns to mud. And that is the second half of the plan she gave in verse 7. I will draw Sisera to the river Kishon, not to the plain generally, to the river. She did not just pick the mountain her men would stand on. She picked the piece of ground the enemy would be standing on when it happened. Now put 900 iron chariots in mud. Every advantage inverts at once. The weight that made them unstoppable is what buries them. Wheels sink to the axle. Horses panic in ground they cannot get purchase on. And the heavy men in armor, standing on a stuck platform, are suddenly the easiest targets in the valley, while 10,000 light infantry with nothing but farm iron come off that hill on foot, moving fine, because men on foot can cross ground horses cannot. Verse 15 of chapter 4 says, Sisera got down off his chariot and ran away on his feet. Sit with that image for a second. The man who held a country for 20 years off the back of a machine, climbing down off it in a wet field and running like a farmhand. Everything he was rested on those wheels, and the wheels were in the mud. And so he became just a tired man in armor, going across a field on foot. Verse 16 says, Barak pursued the chariots all the way back to Harosheth, and there was not a man left, not one. 900 chariots gone in an afternoon. That is the whole 20 years, undone between one rain and one sunset. And the road he ran down leads to a tent, and a woman named Jael, and a hammer and a tent peg. And that is where verse 9 comes true. The Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Jael, a woman in a tent by the road, a bowl of milk, a blanket, and a hammer. I am going to leave it right there tonight, because that hour in that tent is a telling of its own, and it deserves the whole hour. What matters for tonight is that the prophecy Deborah spoke in verse 9, before a single man was called up, landed exactly the way she said it would. Now we come to the part that decided this for me. Not the battle, what she did after it. Judges chapter 5 verse 1. Then sang Deborah and Barak the son of Abinoam on that day, her name first, again. That is the fourth or fifth time in 2 chapters the text has put her ahead of the general in a sentence where it did not have to. In a world that ordered names by rank as a matter of course, that ordering is not accidental, and once you start noticing it, you cannot stop. But the ordering is not the main thing. The main thing is what chapter 5 actually is. It is a poem, 31 verses of victory song, and it is not a summary of chapter 4. It is a different telling of the same day, in verse, with details chapter 4 never mentions. The empty highways, the 40,000 with no shields, the stars, the river. Sisera's mother at the window at the end, waiting for a son who is not coming home. She composed the national record of the war she directed, and understand what a song was for in a world where almost nobody could read. The song was the archive. A written account sits in one place and gets read by the handful of people who can read and who have access to the scroll. A song travels. Children learn it. It gets sung at harvest and at weddings and around fires, and 100 years later, a boy in a village has never seen a scroll, can still tell you what happened at the Kishon because his mother sang it to him. So when she sat down to compose chapter 5, she was not writing a report for a file. She was deciding what an entire nation would remember about that day, and in what words, for as long as the nation lasted. That is a different kind of power than a throne, and I would argue it outlasts one. Think about how rare that is anywhere. The person who plans the campaign gives the order to attack and then writes the account that the country will sing for generations. Most leaders get one of those three. She has all three. And here is the part that makes people sit up when they hear it. And I want to give it to you carefully, because I am not a scholar and I will not pretend to be one. The Hebrew of Judges 5 is old enough that it reads differently from the prose around it. Different grammar, older word forms, the kind of language that shows up in only a handful of places in that whole book. Careful readers who spend their lives on this have long treated it as one of the most ancient pieces of text in the Bible, older in its written form than a great deal of what surrounds it. I am handing you that as what it is. The considered reading of people who work on this, not a thing I can prove to you from a verse. Weigh it how you like, but if it holds, sit with what it means. Near the very bottom of the written record of that faith, in the oldest layer we can reach, there is a war poem, and a woman composed it. Not a woman's story written down by a man. Her own voice in the first person, preserved in language older than most of the book around it. And there is one more thing, chapter 5 does, that I love, and it is at the very end. Verse 28. The mother of Sisera looked out at a window and cried through the lattice, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariots?" She ends her victory song at the enemy's window, with another mother waiting for a son who is dead in a field. Read that and tell me who wrote it. That is not a general's ending. A general ends on the rout. That is somebody who won and then turned the last verse of her own victory poem toward the grief on the other side. And in the middle of her own song, she gives herself a title. Verse 7. The inhabitants of the villages ceased. They ceased in Israel, until that I, Deborah, arose, that I arose a mother in Israel. A mother in Israel. Now hear that the way she meant it, not the way it sounds to a modern ear. That is not a sentimental line about being nurturing. In that language, in that setting, mother of a place is a title of standing. The same way father is used for a founder, or a protector, or a man who holds a household together. Later in the books of Samuel, you find a whole city called a mother in Israel, meaning a place that shelters and feeds the towns around it. She is not saying she felt maternal about the country. She is saying she is what held it. And look at the sentence she built around it. The villages ceased until I arose. She puts the 20 years and her own rising in one line, and she puts herself on the hinge of it. She also praises as freely as she calls out, and I do not want to leave that out. Verse 18. Zebulun and Naphtali were a people that jeoparded their lives unto the death in the high places of the field. Those are the two tribes she levied back in chapter 4. They came when the runner reached them, and she made certain the whole country would sing about it. In the same poem, where Reuben gets asked why he stayed with the sheep. Praise and account, in one song, from one voice, with nobody in the room able to edit it. That is a woman writing her own record, and she does not undersell it. I have to stop here and tell on myself, because I've gotten this one wrong out loud, more than once, in front of people who trusted me. For most of my life, I told the Deborah story as Barak's story, with a woman helping. That is how I heard it as a boy near Macon, and that is how I passed it on. The men in that church did not do it out of meanness. They just could not see any other shape for it, and neither could I. What broke it open for me was reading chapter 5 out loud. Just that. I was sitting in the workshop with the door open, and I read the whole song aloud, the way you have to read poetry. And by verse 7, I had to stop. Because you cannot read a woman saying, I arose, a mother in Israel, in her own voice, in her own poem, and keep her in the helper chair. She is not being described by somebody else. She is telling you who she was, and the nation kept her telling and sang it for centuries. I was past 60 when that landed. Della had been gone a while by then. I remember thinking she would have had something to say about how long it took me. Now look at what she does next in that song, because it is not gentle. Verse 15 and following, she goes tribe by tribe through who showed up and who did not. Verse 16, why abodest thou among the sheepfolds to hear the bleatings of the flocks? That is Reuben, who stayed home with the animals. Verse 17, Gilead abode beyond Jordan, and why did Dan remain in ships? Asher continued on the seashore and abode in his breaches. She names them. In the song, the one that gets sung, Reuben stayed with the sheep. Dan stayed with the boats. Asher stayed on the coast. Zebulun and Naphtali came, and verse 18 says, they jeoparded their lives unto the death in the high places of the field. That is a leader keeping the account. Not privately, not in a report to a council. In the piece of writing the whole country is going to memorize. Generations of Israelites grew up singing a verse that asked Reuben why he stayed with the sheep. You do not get to do that unless the nation has already agreed that your judgment on the matter is the one that counts. And verse 31 closes it. So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might. And the land had rest 40 years. 40 years of rest, twice as long as the occupation lasted. So let me total up the offices, because this is where the argument closes. She heard from God, and the nation knew it. That is the prophetic office, and she is the only person in Judges the text gives that title to. The nation brought her its disputes and lived by her rulings. That is the judicial office, held for years before the crisis ever came. She summoned the general, set the muster, named the tribes, chose the mountain, named the enemy's ground, and gave the order to attack. That is military command, and every piece of it is in the text in her own words. And then she wrote the record that the country sang for generations, convened it, directed it, went with it, wrote it. Nobody else in that entire book does more than 2 of those 4. Most do 1. That is the case. Now, let me be honest and go weigh the other 2 women against it. Because I told you at the top I would, and an argument you only make against weak opponents is not worth much. Start with the queen, because she has the best case. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1. And when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with hard questions. Verse 2. And she came to Jerusalem with a very great train, with camels that bear spices, and very much gold, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. Now weigh what is actually in those 2 verses, because people hear this story as a romantic visit, and it is nothing of the kind. She is a head of state. Sheba sat far to the south, most likely in the region of Arabia, and across toward the Horn of Africa. And it was rich. The incense trade ran through there. And whoever controlled that trade controlled something every temple and every palace in the ancient world wanted. She is not a princess coming to be impressed. She runs the country that supplies the luxury goods, and she came to prove him with hard questions. That is the language of a diplomatic and intellectual test. She traveled somewhere between 12 and 1,500 miles across desert, on camels, with a train big enough that the text remarks on it, in order to sit across from the most celebrated ruler of the age and find out whether he was as smart as people said. Nobody sent her. No husband is mentioned anywhere in the account. No father, no king above her, no council she reports to. She decided, and she went. And when she got there, she did not defer. Verse 3 says, Solomon answered all her questions, and there was nothing hid from the king that he told her not. She kept asking until she was satisfied. I want to give her full weight here. because she has been shrunk over the years into a footnote in Solomon's biography, and she is not a footnote. She is the only foreign ruler in that whole account who comes to Jerusalem as a peer, not as a tributary bringing required payment, not as an enemy, not as a marriage alliance, as an equal, on her own business. And read what she actually says in verse 9, because it is not flattery. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighted in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, therefore made he thee king to do judgment and justice. She names the God of Israel out loud in that court. And look at how she frames his whole authority, made king to do judgment and justice. That is a sovereign reminding another sovereign what the job is for in front of his own people. She did not come to be impressed. She came to find out whether the reputation held, and before she left, she told him what the standard was. And look how the visit ends. Verse 13. And King Solomon gave unto the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, beside that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. All her desire, whatsoever she asked. 2 sovereigns, and one of them gave the other everything she requested. That is not a supplicant leaving a court. That is a state visit that went her way. And she does not disappear from the book after that. 1,000 years later, in Matthew 12, verse 42, Jesus is talking to a crowd of religious men, and he says, "The Queen of the South shall rise up in the judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon." He holds her up as the standard they failed to meet. She is still being invoked as an authority a millennium after she died. That is a strong case. If you want to put her first, I will not argue you out of it, and I understand exactly why. Now, Esther. And here I have to be careful, because Esther's story is the most dramatic of the 3, and drama is not the same thing as power. Esther, chapter 4, verse 11. She is Queen of Persia, and she says this, "All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. Read that as a description of her position, because that is what it is. She is queen of an empire running from India to Ethiopia, and she cannot walk into a room in her own house without risking execution. Her standing runs entirely through a husband who can end her with a decision, and who has already deposed one queen for disobedience before Esther ever arrived. That is chapter 1. That is real power, and it is borrowed power. Every bit of it comes through a man, and it can be withdrawn. And notice how she has to use it. She cannot issue an order. She cannot summon anybody. What she can do is throw 2 dinner parties and time a request perfectly, which is exactly what chapters 5 through 7 are. A woman with no direct authority, working the only lever she has, patiently, over days, because a direct approach would kill her. Compare that to Deborah sending a runner to Kadesh, and a general walking the length of the country because she asked. One of those women had to plan a banquet to get a word in. The other one gave a battle order. What she does with it is extraordinary. Chapter 4, verse 16. So will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. She spends the whole of it, at the risk of her life, and she saves a people. Nobody should ever diminish that. But set the 3 side by side honestly, and the shape is clear. Esther has borrowed power, spent bravely. The Queen of Sheba has inherited power, exercised independently, real sovereignty, answering to no one in the text. And Deborah has power that nobody handed her at all. No throne, no husband who matters to the account, no inheritance mentioned. A country simply decided her word was true, and kept walking up a hill to hear it. Here is where I land, and you may land somewhere else, and that is all right. Sheba's power came with her. Esther's power was given to her and could be taken. Deborah's power was recognized, and the only way to take that away is to make a nation stop trusting a person, which nobody managed to do. Now I want to point at something the text does that I think is the quietest and strongest thing in these two chapters. It never explains her. Not once. Go read chapters 4 and 5 straight through looking for it. There is no verse saying this was unusual for the time. There is no clause explaining how a woman came to hold that office. There is no aside defending the arrangement to a skeptical reader. No note about special circumstances, no apology, no justification of any kind. The storyteller reports that a woman was prophet and judge of Israel, in the same flat voice he uses to report that Sisera had 900 chariots. It is weather. It is what was. And I have come to believe that silence says more than a defense would have. Because a text that defends a thing is a text that expects an objection. This one does not seem to expect one. It just tells you the country came up the hill to her and gets on with the story. Compare that to how the same book handles other unusual things. When Gideon needs convincing, you get a fleece and a sign and a whole conversation. When Jephthah's background is a problem, chapter 11 opens by telling you exactly who his mother was and why the elders threw him out. Because the writer knows you will want to know. That storyteller is perfectly capable of stopping to explain something. He does not stop for her. Now here is the other thing I want you to take, and it is the practical one. Look at what her authority was actually built out of. Not a battle. The battle comes in chapter 4, and by then she has already been judging Israel for who knows how long. Verse 5 has her holding court, before verse 6 has her sending for anybody. The famous day is the end of the story, not the beginning of her standing. It was built out of years of ordinary mornings, sitting under that tree, hearing a dispute about a boundary line, hearing a dispute about a debt, getting it right, then doing it again the next day and the next, while the roads stayed empty and nothing changed and no poem was being written about any of it. Nobody was watching that. There is not one verse describing a single one of those rulings, but that is where the thing came from. When the crisis finally arrived and she said, "Take 10,000 men to Tabor," the reason a general walked the length of the country to hear it is that 20 years of small correct judgments were standing behind the sentence. She sat down and she stayed, and the nation came to her. There is something in that I want to name, because it runs against how most of us think about getting anywhere. We treat the visible moment as the thing, and the years before it as the waiting room. This story has it the other way around. The years under the tree are the thing. Tabor is just the day the account came due. And notice, she did not go looking for the crisis. She did not raise an army in year 3 and try to force it. She judged. She did her actual job, in the actual conditions, for as long as it took. And when the moment arrived, she already had everything she needed to meet it, because she had been building it the whole time without calling it that. I do not think she knew she was building anything. I think she thought she was settling arguments about goats. 40 years of national peace came out of a woman doing small, unrecorded work under a tree for 2 decades. Not one of those rulings is in your Bible. All of them are the reason the rest of it happened. I would put that in front of anybody who feels like their life right now is small and repetitive and unwatched. I am not going to promise you a Tabor. Some people never get one. What I will say is that the authority in this story was manufactured entirely out of the unwatched part, and the watched part lasted 1 afternoon. And if you are still with me this far in, here is the last thing I have got, and it is for whoever needs it. There is a particular kind of person who has spent their whole life being told, sometimes out loud and mostly not, where they do not belong. which chair is not theirs, which room they can come into but not speak in. I grew up around that, and so did most of the people I love, and I am not going to dress it up tonight. What I notice about this story is that God did not argue with anybody about it. He did not send a prophet to Israel to explain that a woman could judge. He just gave her the word and let a nation walk up a hill for 20 years and figure it out on their own. Della used to say, "The argument is not the work. Do the work and the argument settles itself." I did not always believe her, and I will say the other half of that, because a storyteller who only comforts is not telling you the truth. Doing the work does not always settle it. Some people do the work their whole lives and the room never comes around. Deborah got a nation that walked up the hill. Plenty of people never get that, and I am not going to stand here and promise you a hill. What I will say is that the record in this book is not kept by the room. 20 years of rulings nobody wrote down are the reason there is a chapter 5 at all, and the song closes it. Judges 5, verse 31. But let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might, not as a queen, not as a general, as the sun coming up, which does not announce anything, and does not ask permission, and does not stop. So take us back to the palm tree. A woman sitting in the shade between Ramah and Bethel with a line of men waiting on her word. 900 iron chariots on the roads below. Villages emptied out, highways nobody would walk, a country 20 years into the habit of losing. And her, in the same seat, every morning, doing the work. That is my answer. The most powerful woman in your Bible is not the one with the caravan, and it is not the one with the crown. It is the one who had no title anybody gave her, no palace, no army of her own, and one tree, and who held 4 offices at once in the worst century that book records: prophet, judge, commander, and then the poet who wrote the whole thing down so a nation would remember it right. You may rank them differently. That is genuinely all right. Bring me your case in the comments. I read them, and I have changed my mind before. And I want to leave one thing with you that is not about ranking anybody. The land had rest 40 years. That is the last line of her chapter. 40 years. Long enough that children were born into peace and grew up, and had children of their own who never once had to take the byway instead of the road. A whole generation walked those highways in the open, and never knew what it had cost to get them back, and never knew the name of the woman under the tree. That is usually how it goes with the people who actually hold things up. The rest, they win outlives the memory of them winning it. She got a song, though. Somebody made sure of that. And if you sat with me through this whole telling, subscribe. I do these one at a time, and there is another one coming. Put Deborah in the comments if she found you tonight, and tell me the story you want told next. If a face came to mind while I was talking, somebody holding something up alone and not getting named for it, send them this one. Say their name out loud to them this week. One person is plenty. One more thing before I pray, and then I will let you go. Notice she never left. There is no chapter where Deborah moves to a palace. No verse where somebody builds her a house in Jerusalem, because there is no Jerusalem yet worth speaking of. The last thing the record does with her is put her in a song, and the tree keeps her name. She won the biggest military victory in that book and went back to the same seat. I think about that more than I think about the battle. Whatever she was after, it was not the promotion. Let me pray with you before you go. Father, we thank you for a book that wrote her down and did not explain her away. We thank you for the years under that tree that nobody recorded, for the small right judgments made when no one was watching, and for a song old enough to still be carrying her voice. Lord, you see every soul listening tonight, whatever house they come from, whatever road they walk. We ask you for the ones who are holding something up alone right now, the ones nobody sends for. the ones doing the work in the unwatched part. Steady their hands. Keep them faithful in the ordinary mornings. And give them somebody who will walk up the hill and say, "We will not sit down until you come." Amen. Walk like Deborah. Walk now. One last thing before you go. This is how I read scripture, not a prophetic word. I quote from the King James Version, unless I say otherwise. If you read it differently, I want to hear it. Drop your thought in the comments.